welcome everyone, Tuva here, lovely to see you again. This is the next in the series of the runes, and it is the third Aett, the first one, and that is Tiwaz. Now if you don't know what Tiwaz is, it's basically talking about the god Tyr. Now Tyr is all about war, justice and sacrifice, and as we go along you will find out a bit more. Tyr is for Tuesday, so if you want to give homage to him, Tuesday is the best day of the week, so it's Tyr's Day, Tuesday. Yeah. Now he represents the sword, which is my Tyr sword here. You can see I have put things upon it. I have blooded it. It is my Tyr sword now. If you look at the Tyr rune, you can see what it looks like. It's like it's pointing to above, to the gods. It's pointing to a way that we are towards our deities. So for example, when you are giving sacrifice to your deities, if you're going to give an offering, you don't just give them what's left. You would go out and you would buy something that was really precious that you think a lot of, and then you would give it in sacrifice. And in a way, Tiwaz is talking about sacrifice. Now the colours for Tiwaz is red, yellow and blue. The element is air. The animal that you would consider part of Tiwaz is the wolf. Beautiful, one that you don't want to pick a fight with. And Tyr is the god of war, so you can see the resemblance there. The object is sword. The body parts would be the wrist and the hand, and that is logical when you know the story of Tyr, how he gave his hand. Well, he didn't give it, it was taken from him, so it was a sacrifice. So Fenrir, if you don't know the story goes that Fenrir was getting a bit too big for his boots and the gods wanted to bind him, made out of all sorts of stuff, magical stuff, to bind him up so he couldn't get out. Now Tyr went to him and said, "Let me bind you. I am truth. I do not lie." And he said, "Okay, if you put your hand in my mouth I will let you," because every binding that he had done before he'd got out of, so he really thought he could get out of it. So Tyr put his hand into Fenrir's mouth and he bit it off because he couldn't get out of the bindings. And in a way that was justice for Tyr's lie, but it was also sacrifice. It wasn't just any hand, it was the hand that held the sword that was going to battle at Ragnarok. So you see the importance, he needed that right hand, and so to give that in sacrifice was actually sacrificing his own life. So we can see there is a link here between the sword, the hand, the wrist, the wolf and Tyr. So Tiwaz is a very important rune and we can use it in many ways. Plants would be hazel and oak. Oak is a strong tree with strong branches and grows very, very big and very, very powerful. Hazel has many layers to it, and some of it is hard and some of it is soft. So you can see there's like a balance going on. The aromas would be lemongrass and thyme. The sweetness and the bitterness which you put together, which comes with sacrifice, again can be used in incenses and all sorts of stuff when you are using the rune at your altar. Mineral, coral. Coral lays low, it gives of itself in the seas, but it also shows a positive side to itself as well, and it is very beautiful, but it absorbs. And again, it gives of itself, but it also grows every year. It doesn't stay stagnant, and that is another thing about Tiwaz. It is not a stagnant rune. It is a rune that we can use when we need to learn about sacrifice. And in a minute I will take you through a path working which will talk about sacrifice, basically, because we learn so much through sacrifice, but sacrifice comes hard to us. So guys, when you think about Tyr, how strong he was, how mighty he was renowned to be, but because of that one act he lost his footing amongst the gods, yet he was called the priest from the other gods, because none of them had the courage to do what he had done. But he went against his own judgment, his own standards. He was a god of justice as well, so to actually lie was his downfall. But he did pay the price, and he's paid that price. And to lose the one thing that would keep him and others safe was quite a sacrifice. But it needed to be done. And again, we can learn from people how they have had to sacrifice to salvage the greater. So when you take one thing and sacrifice it for the greater need, it is indeed the best way to go forwards. So we can use it in many forms. Now when you look at the rune, and I'll point it again, when you look at it, it's pointing up. Now we as witches and practitioners who look to deity will look above, look to them. Our higher self is always above. As above, so below. But we do look above. Now when you look above, you are going higher. And so this is pointing upwards through the air, and it's got a point on it which is pointing to exactly where we want to be aiming. You could argue that it also looks like an arrow, and again it can be turned around to the detriment of bringing the wrath of the gods, the wrath of Tyr, down to the earth. So we have two ways of looking at it, but it is a rune that we can use when we need clarification on situations that are going to be quite hard for us, where there may be a need to sacrifice, or there may be a need for to be strong, to get that strength of when you fight, to push forwards. It is not a stagnant rune. At the end of the series, as I said before, I will put together all the runes and their shapes, and we can do it to the calling of the runes, which is nice. It's nice to do, and it is a type of rune. I think they call it rune yoga. So that'll be a good one, guys. And that's one for the end of the series. And as we are on the third Aett now, and so it won't be much longer, and we will have finished the whole lot. And maybe I'll do one on a recap very quickly of each one in one video, so that you can, for reference, just look at that one and say, oh yeah, that one was that and that one was that. Because sometimes, even though we do absorb knowledge, sometimes it's hard to remember exactly. There are little points that you can forget, so it's a good thing to have a reference. So I will do that as well. Anyway, be great now to drum and call on the rune Tiwaz. So if you'd like to get comfortable, and then when you're comfortable, take some deep breaths in through the nose, hold for a few seconds, and then out through the mouth. And with each breath that you go in, try to relax your body and try to forget things that's going on around you. Anything that's upset you, just put it to one side. You can grab it back afterwards, but while you're doing this, you need to be away from all that. No negativity. So I'm going to drum and I want you to breathe in, and when we get there, when we get to a point where I think that you may be relaxed, we will walk forwards. Now as you relax, you find yourself in the dark. You've been here before, many times. You are in Ginonga Gap, primordial time before the existence. In the distance you see a speck of light to the left and a speck of light to the right. The pillar of ice, the pillar of fire. We think about why we're here, because it's lovely. We're lovely and warm, and we're quite happy. So we're going to call upon Tiwaz. 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 You now see ahead of you Tiwaz coming towards you, and as it does, the redness, the bright redness of the sign of Tiwaz is coming towards you. It looks like a big arrow pointing upwards, and you look at this with might because you see how strong it is. And as it comes towards you, you feel drawn to walk towards it. You're not scared because you feel warmth, you feel a knowing that you've been here before. We will be going through the door of Tiwaz now, into the world of the runes, the rune of Tiwaz, the realm of Tiwaz. You find yourself surrounded by the gods. You are in Asgard, and you look around with a knowing that you've seen it before. When you have made sacrifice to the gods, you have seen it in your visions, but never have you been there. And you are a bit scared that they might notice you're there. You see them all jeering and laughing and drinking merrily, and it's like they don't know you're there. But all of a sudden you see Tyr coming with his sword and his drink, and he's laughing. You are at the point of time just before his sacrifice with Fenrir. The gods are talking to Tyr and saying, what shall we do? We don't know what to do. Fenrir is getting beyond a joke. What do we do? Tyr comes over to me. He has seen me. And he says, welcome, child. You have come to witness what sacrifice is. But before you see my sacrifice, I need to show you the sacrifices made upon your earth. the sacrifice is made from the heart of the human, the heart of the soul. And he says, come with me and I will show you. You find yourself in a farmer's field. It's dead, all being harvested. And the farmer has been trying to feed his family. And you see him in the farmhouse now with his family. And they have hardly any food, but they know there's enough to feed the children. There's enough to feed the livestock, but there isn't enough for them. Because if they eat that part that would be for them, they wouldn't be able to let it go to seed and let it be there to plant for the following year. So they merrily give to the children and the livestock and make out that they have eaten, so that the children do not feel badly. The mother is so hungry, she goes into her room and cries because of the hunger, but she knows that very soon she will be able to eat again. There is other foods coming, but they still need to salvage and let things go to seed for them to be able to plant for the following year. They decide to take the seeds, and it is now the time of year when the children have grown a bit more, for they have been fed well, and the livestock are getting fatter. They are also fed well, but the mother and the father are ailing through their sacrifice for their children. They are now very unwell. The children take the seeds and they plant them, and the sacrifice does not stop there, my friends, for the children learn to their detriment that to leave the seeds in the ground without anyone looking after them results in losing half the seeds, for the birds come down and they peck and take them away. So the children have to give up their time, their sleep, and sit with the field, because they know if they leave it, they will not have a crop for the following year. Because of this sacrifice, when it comes to harvest, they have a bountiful harvest, but it's taken its toll on the mother, for she cannot struggle on in this way. And sad though it is, she passes. The father is heartbroken. But he gives thanks to Tyr. He gives thanks to the gods, because he knows that through their sacrifice generations will come and multiply, and their seed will go on and on, and their great grandchildren will have stories to tell of their plight and how they survived. Tyr looks at you and you look at him, and he says, do you get what I am saying? Sacrifice doesn't always end well for the person who is giving the sacrifice, but it is necessary. And it is necessary because those that don't do sacrifice will also sacrifice in other ways. And we will look at what happens next. He takes you to another farmhouse where the family are eating everything, because their attitude is, we don't need to stock up because our next door neighbours will have enough for us. They will not see us go hungry. But the next door neighbours this year, their seeds didn't take, and so there was nothing, and both families perish. The story behind that is, to sacrifice is to become alive for the following year. To not give sacrifice would be greedy, and through that greed you come out of it in a detrimental way, in a very negative way. And that was the end of their line. That was the end of their families. Very sad. but people have to learn through their sacrifices what they will gain, but not just to gain. It's not about doing things to gain. You do not give to receive, but if you give from the heart, you will receive in abundance. And this is something mankind has to learn from an early age. He takes you to another place where you see people giving thanks and giving their offerings to the gods at the great altars. And as they come to the altar, they lay their offerings. And there is one woman who gives her last piece of bread, her last piece of meal onto the altar. Though she is hungry, she gives it, and she gives it with the right heart. And there is a young man, and he has kept his food to himself, and he goes to the forest and he picks up a few stones and a feather, and he goes to the altar and he puts it on the altar. But he goes home and has a nice big meal, knowing that that little lady had nothing, knowing that others had sacrificed, but he thought he was sacrificing in another way. You see, it comes from the heart at the end of the day, guys. You cannot give if you do not have the right heart, because the heart, if it's hard, cannot perceive the damage this may do. Tyr now says, come back now with me to Asgard. And when he gets there, there is Fenrir arguing with them all, and they say, Fenrir, Odin says, we need to bind you because you have been up to no good again. And we ask Tyr to do it because you know he is truthful. And Fenrir looks at Tyr and says, is this correct? Tyr says, yes, because you know you'll probably get out of the binding yet again. Fenrir at this laughs and goes, yes, do your worst. But I don't trust any of you. And he looks around and he says, Tyr, I know that you are truthful, but even you, I worry. So Tyr says, okay, what do you want? And he says, I want you to put your right hand, your important hand, your sword hand, into my mouth. And if anything goes wrong, I will bite it off. Tyr looks around at everyone and he says, okay, and he puts his hand into Fenrir's mouth and they bind him. And then Fenrir realises he can't get out of these. They are magical bindings done specially. Odin had it done special by different magical aspects. He is so angry, he bites Tyr's hand off. And so he is bound. And Tyr loses his hand until Ragnarok. He has lost his way of living, of helping others, because he can no longer hold his special sword, his sword of power. So Tyr comes over to you and he says, do you understand now, my child, how sacrifice can affect others but also affect yourselves? How it can have an effect on generations to come. And at that he says, it's time for you now to go back. You look at him for one last time and smile and say, Tyr, thank you for your sacrifice, and I am so sorry that you had to give up your justice to do this, but it was for the greater good, and as that you do appreciate it. All of a sudden you see Tiwaz standing just behind you, and you know that you have to leave. So you turn, giving it one last glance back over your shoulder, and you enter through the door, back to where you come from. you're back in where you should be, with a little bit more wiser knowledge how important it is to be full of justice, but be very generous from the heart and your sacrifices. Now you are back in your bodies, guys. Wriggle your fingers and your toes, and when you're ready, open your eyes and make sure you eat and drink something as soon as possible to ground, for it is very important. There, guys, that is the rune Tiwaz. I hope you got some understanding from it. You can use it in many ways, but it is a good rune to use, and it has its opposite sides as well, as you can tell from the path working. You can look at things in two ways. When you are thinking about what you're going to do, you can make two different decisions. Again, the upward arrow, if you was to cut it down the middle, would be in two parts, exactly the same. So we can see there is a dual personality to it as well. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. I hope you got something from it, as I just said. And thank you to my new subscribers. You are very welcome to the channel. I hope you get something from all the content on here. And if you have any questions, please put a comment down. I will always get back to you. To those that have come back and are watching my content, thank you also. And to those that always support me, write comments and are there for me, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I will be doing a live stream very soon, but I would like to do a question and answer, so if you have anything you'd like to know, just jot it down below and I will add it into the live stream. And I will be doing the live stream soon, but I wanted to get some things before I do it so that it's interesting. But I like to get to know everybody. It would be great. So if you can be there, I will be very happy. And I will obviously put the schedule out so that you know when it will be. So I'm going to leave it there, guys. Wherever you are, whatever time of day, night or evening it may be, I wish you the best ever. House of Alang.